part of the equation that wasn't in our control was the mass general public and the business sector not ready for women. Yeah. Not ready for powerful women, not ready for women with big voices who have grand ideas. We didn't have the deep pockets. I had $0 that I could be an owner with. You know, I didn't make money in the beginning playing soccer.
So Alex, Brandi Chastain, she's an icon. The superlatives are off the charts. 2-time Olympic gold medalist, 2-time World Cup winner, and now a co-owner of the NWSL's newest team, BFC.
Obviously an iconic player, as you mentioned, but I'm really interested to see the business side, how she transfers from player to owner and how she plans to bring value to that franchise.
She starts in '91 on the U.S. women's national team in the very first ever Women's World Cup. They win it. She gets cut from the team, but comes back for the '96 Olympics. Then that iconic moment in 1999 that sets her on a completely different journey. And then the intervening 20 years where we as a business community, as a sports community, try and figure out how do we make a business out of women's soccer?
Well, what's interesting is there's a 25-year window between 99, the moment, right?
Yeah.
And here we are 25 years later and it's finally coming around.
Yeah.
And I really think women's sports and the growth opportunity will be greater in the next 5 years than the last 25 combined.
I can't wait to hear the back and forth about player turned owner.
It's very interesting. I'm intrigued. I'm going to ask her, like, how did you get this enormous private equity group, one of the most respected in the world, to invest in team sports, in women's sports? And I'm also excited, what is her pitch? What is the value proposition in women's sports? I know I feel very bullish about it. I want to hear her business perspective on this opportunity.
All right, we should actually get started so we don't leave any of the good stuff on the practice field. All right, so Brandi, we're very happy here. Let's start, if you don't mind, introducing yourself and what you're doing these days.
My name is Brandi Chastain. I am, I'm not sure how to introduce myself in terms of my title. I'm a co-founder of the Bay FC, the newest expansion team in the NWSL. I'm one of 4 founding women, and I'm born and raised in San Jose, California, which is right in the heart of Silicon Valley and the Bay Area. So that's my secondary title too. I'm a mom and a grandmother and a wife, I guess.
And a pretty good soccer player.
And back in my day.
We're so fascinated by you having, I feel like both of us like watch this career that has mirrored soccer in this country. I think we have to start in 1999, that moment that you kick the winning penalty kick. The world changes. I mean, the world changes for you. Yeah. What did it do for you as a human, but also as a business person?
Well, first and foremost, it made me sleepless for many nights and many months. But in all seriousness, it gave a visibility to a sport, a team, individuals, not just myself, that had really been deserving since 91 when we had the first Women's World Cup in China, and 1996 was the first time we had the Olympic Games. So imagine the Olympics have been around 100 years, and women's soccer is just now getting in 1996. And so I think 96 was kind of the first boost that we had that gave us the idea and the confidence that we could put a Women's World Cup in massive stadiums from coast to coast, north to south. And, you know, FIFA wasn't really interested in that. And so I think there was a big battle for us to show up and to show off what we could do. And that on the business side, as well as the footballing side of things. And so it changed that dynamic for sure going forward. We've seen every World Cup now done in this bigger way. I think for me personally, it gave me a platform to stand on so that I could just scream at the top of my lungs about the importance of women's sports, the importance of women in decision-making positions, the importance of young girls participating in sports. It created an opportunity for me to dream of a nonprofit for young girls. So many things changed that day. And in the moment, I didn't know that, not at all. And that was not the intention, which I feel really good about, because I think all great things come from organic moments and genuine moments. And so I'm obviously very proud of what has happened for women in sports and women in general post 1999.
Yeah, when you look at iconic moments over the last century, I mean, for me, my era was the Reggie Jackson 3 home run in the World Series against the Dodgers on 3 pitches. You look at Montana to Clark, you being a San Jose person, that famous pass. And you look at Jordan, the way he retired against Utah. To me, as an American, I felt so much pride. My question to you is, I know how I felt. How did that make you feel? A, as an American, but B, as really a pioneer in a moment.
Yeah, I think in the moment, I was so exhausted prior to that. You know, we practice those kicks a lot, and that's normal, as you would in baseball, fielding grounders or bunts or whatever. So that's a normal kick. I would have taken a kick in the run of play, but this is special. You're in the World Cup. You're in the Rose Bowl. It's the final game. It's been a bend, not break situation between two teams who were so good that either one could have been crowned champion. Right before going out to the middle, our assistant coach had come up to me and said, hey, you want to take a penalty? I said, yep, no problem, I got it. Then our head coach comes over, Tony DeCicco, and he says, okay, he puts his hand on my shoulder and goes, you're going to take a penalty? I said, yep. I talked to Lauren already about it. He goes, okay, good. You're going to take it with your left foot. And then he ran off. So I didn't think about it because I practiced them in practice, no problem. But later, after the kick and after everything sort of took a beat, I realized I'd never taken a penalty with my left foot in a game.
Wow.
And now we're in the World Cup final. And so I think, it would be like, hey, step up left-handed and hit. So I think in that moment, what jumps off the page for me is this concept that I try to share every time I have a meeting with a young person on the sports field or in a big group of business people, is that we all have tools. And sometimes we get stuck in using them in the same manner that we always have used them. But we're so much more than that, and we can really turn those tools into to work in different ways.
I honestly think there's a great, just as a fan and as a former athlete, I think for our viewers and listeners, I think there's a great coaching and teaching opportunity. Before your coach says, hit it with your left, where was from 1 through 10 your confidence level? And then when he tells you that in real time, what does it do to that number? Yeah,
I think my confidence was 10, and it was probably 11 after he said that. And the reason being is, again, earlier in my career, my position was goal scorer. That's all I woke up thinking about. That's what I went to bed thinking about. But after the 91 World Cup, I was cut from the team, and I spent 4 years away from the national team. And Tony brought me back, and he changed my position. And so I trusted this man and this coach implicitly. So if he said something to me, he was telling me that because he believed that I could do it. And so my confidence was always very high when he put me in uncomfortable positions or unusual moments. And so I think I was exhausted as well, Alex, to be fair. But in all honesty, I think that's the narrative of a coach in young player's life is so important. And if we get that right, people can blossom into just about anything.
In a weird way, Jason, it's funny because I'm thinking about my World Series moments. You being a little exhausted probably helps because it kind of you just want to survive, and it keeps you in the pocket. If you're not tired, you might be a little bit too energetic and too high. So that's interesting.
The expectation for women's soccer just explodes at that point in that media barnstorming tour, everything that happens after that. What was your expectation for women's soccer as a business?
I have to tell you, I've been in this almost 5 decades. I've been loving and playing and supporting women's soccer for quite some time. And of course, I thought it would be that inflection point to a successful league that would then transform into more driven by business than by just the love and the passion of the game. And that didn't happen. So that was very disappointing at the minimum, right? So in 2003, when the WUSA shut its doors, we had a chance for reflection. And reflection is amazing because it allows you to say what you did well, to celebrate those moments, but then to recognize, okay, what didn't go well and how can we change? And if you're really good and you're really invested and you really believe, you can change anything. And I think this, as the third iteration of women's soccer, the NWSL, we've gone through a lot of hardship. And I honestly believe that part of the equation that wasn't in our control was the mass general public and the business sector not ready for women. Yeah. Not ready for powerful women, not ready for women with big voices who have grand ideas. We didn't have the deep pockets. And before coming here today, I think that's the one thing that kept coming into my head was I had $0 that I could be an owner with. You know, I didn't make money in the beginning playing soccer, and I made some money. And when I say some, it's much less than what they're making now. And I felt like, okay, I could make a living, but not really great. And I was probably only one of maybe a dozen,
right?
Possibly. So I don't think our illusions were too grand at that time, but we felt that how could 90,000 plus, 40 million or more people tune in and have this not go somewhere? And so we've been believers ever since, but it's taken a lot of cajoling and a lot of educating and a lot of believing, and then, you know, finding the right people.
Without getting too uncomfortably deep into your finances, that's not, life-changing money doesn't come to you after 99.
No.
Not even close.
Not close. I have to work every day, thankfully.
Yeah.
In a good way. Abby Wambach said it so eloquently, I thought, at the ESPYs when she was standing next to Peyton Manning, if you might remember it. You know, her thing is, here she is standing up as Athlete of the Year and receiving this amazing, impressive award, but tomorrow she's got to go to work because the money she made won't sustain her for the rest of her life. And that's what's different. That's the difference between men and women's sports right now. And, you know, we're working diligently every day to show the value. I mean, listen, let's talk about the two buckets. We've got men's professional sports and we've got women's professional sports. And what I think is so fascinating about the business sector is that we know that women spend the majority of money. So why is everything pushing in this direction, opposite of that? Why don't we go after women in sports? Why don't we get into women in sports? Because that's where the money's spent. So I think now people have finally woke up to the fact that this is the richest, deepest well of talent, intellect, opportunity that is out there. There's nothing else out there that has as many resources and as many people who can do great things as women's sports.
You know, one of the moments which was obviously critical was even before 1999, which was 1991. And, you know, that first World Cup opened a lot of eyes. Could you have imagined in 1991 when I believe you got $500 for winning the World Cup?
That's right.
No prize money for the
right.
for the team. That was just a bonus, I believe, that U.S. Soccer paid. Could you have imagined, or was it your assumption that, of course, one day it would be like this?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And I think in the moment, that's not what we were thinking about, right? We were playing a game that we loved, that made us feel individually accepted, wanted, good about ourselves, and that we could collectively come together from all the corners of the United States and create this beautiful harmony on the field, born out of competition. Like, I think this is something that is really important and something that I stress all the time, that, you know, competition for women has historically not been a good thing because there's only been one seat at the table. And so we have to compete against each other. We couldn't support one another. But this team was a beautiful example of how if Alex and I were fighting for the same position, we could still be great teammates. And we had that. And I think that's why this team, and going forward into 1999, we were so successful, how critical that is. There's enough out there for all of us, and we can support each other in that way. And I think going forward, that really is going to be a part of the landscape for women's sports. But thinking back to 91, you know, we weren't thinking about big contracts. We were thinking U.S. Soccer needs to do better. without a doubt. We had great captains in Carla Overbeck, Julie Foudy, Michelle Akers, and we fought for contracts. Honestly, U.S. Soccer, they put our back against the wall in 96 or 95 after the World Cup, and basically the players were willing to give up the Olympics, the first ever Olympics in Atlanta, for a better contract. Not for then, but for the future. And we stood our ground, and we got better, which was still not good enough, but it was a move in the right direction. But 91 was the first opportunity to display what we were doing on a big scale, and for people to look and say, something is going on, and we could put 60,000 people in a stadium in Guangzhou, China, and put out 2 great products and have the game be excellent.
And Jason asked you about 99, and that wasn't like the moment that changed things for you. When you take a step back, over the last 5 years, I've seen some real movement. And you see Caitlin Clark going off, and you do. What are maybe 1 or 2, 3 things that have happened that all of a sudden you have big private equity firms, institutional capital, trying to pour money into women's sports?
Yeah, I would say moments like Caitlin Clark, looking at collegiate women's sports. I think Nebraska held a volleyball game inside of the football stadium, and it got 90,000 people. I mean, that moves the needle. I think you look at Women's World Cup, again, the U.S. won back-to-back World Cup, 2015, 2019. You know, how big can this World Cup be? And what is the potential for selling sponsorships and broadcast rights? It's changed. Honestly, FIFA didn't believe and wasn't interested in women's soccer, but as a vehicle of equity, they had to be, even though it wasn't equitable in the funds. But we're getting there, and that's important. It's still frustrating. There's still opportunity out there to be better, and I think, Alex, to give you more examples, I think every day we're seeing young girls signing up, participating in sports of all kinds. So we're onto something, and I think everybody on the outside, those people who were uncomfortable maybe in women's sports, are now finding interest. They're finding that it's valid and that they want to be involved.
I think transparency has been one of the things that have actually helped women's sports and the trajectory of it. And I'll tell you what I mean. When you look at the ESPN numbers, for example, we can now see them. The audience, the viewers can see them daily, almost weekly, right? And when you looked at the Final Four last year, what was comparable was the viewership and the ratings. But I'll tell you what wasn't comparable is how the media companies value and what they pay or don't pay for women's sports. We're so bullish at A-Rod Corp and women's sports. And of course, we own the Timberwolves and the Lynx. And now we're looking at a third sport, a second sport in women, a third sport to own in the world of women's sports, which we're very excited about. And
I would even take that example that you gave about the basketball and go all the way down to the size of the weight room. I mean, the fact that the women had like 20 weights and the men had a 5,000 square foot gym basically in the hotel. So yeah, it even when your organization like the NCAA doesn't support you in the way, even though the numbers are even, it begs a lot of questions like, what is going on? You know, why are we so afraid of this environment? And I can't tell you, is it a gender thing? Is it a sporting thing?
I do think there's a rewiring of the brain that has to happen. It's not a zero-sum game. I actually make a different argument that the more you compliment and reward women, the better it is for sports. And when everything rises, all boats rise. Right. It's not like women get more, we get less. I don't see it that way.
One of the things that you alluded to, Brandi, in that post-99 era with the WUSA and then the subsequent league before the NWSL, I mean, if you look at it from a pure business perspective, there's essentially no sustained investment. You think about, we were talking about this, you think about the Lynx, the WNBA, they're 26 years in. Why didn't people stick with it longer?
I can't answer that because I wasn't the ownership group, but I think what I would assert is that it was a passion play. It was, my kids are playing. We love it. We want to be a part of it. We want to help grow it. And I think at that time, Alex, to your point, it was, if you exist, then there is less. And we don't want that to grow. So I think there was an actual tamping down of the interest on it. Listen, Major League Soccer has been around for a long time. They are supporting a group that I work with in Women in Soccer who are trying to make soccer opportunities accessible for more women and marginalized groups. And Major League Soccer is supporting our career fair. So that is phenomenal. But it's taken a long time for us to coexist in a way that I've always said it's soccer. Baseball doesn't have a natural competitor, right? Does not have a natural competitor. And so baseball has been able to exist in this. It's a traditional American sport. For us, I think soccer did feel slightly threatened at times because of women's soccer. Instead of seeing it like you saw it, which is, hey, we're going to do soccer together. We're going to make it so great. It's going to be undeniable. We are the world's leading sport by far. There's nothing out there that compares to us. So why wouldn't we raise this boat to be on this level?
And so during that period of underinvestment and candidly like failure of leagues, what does that feel like from your perspective as someone who's devoted her life to the sport? You're coaching, you're playing, and then ultimately coaching. Like, what are you seeing, and what does that disconnect feel like as you're kind of looking around, probably like mildly bewildered?
Well, I think there's two sides to this. I think there is great opportunity, and I think there is, of course, disappointment. And on the disappointment side, it's just how can I do a better job of sharing and making other people see the value of this? And we thought for a long time we had done that, and we had broadcasted the biggest game in the world for women's sports at the time, and we still weren't getting that traction. And again, to your point, Alex, about, listen, people need to be rewired. I think what's been happening in business for so long is the way we do things, right? That's the culture. We've already been doing it like this. It's been successful. Don't tell us how to do what we do. When that's not what we're interested in. What we're interested in is growing opportunity.
My question to you is imposter syndrome. Is there something there for you that when you walk into an owner's room with all these smart people, private equity, institutional capital, is there an imposter syndrome for you as an athlete?
I would say that there's a level of understanding who I am. Mm-hmm. I'm not. I don't have an MBA. I don't have a private equity firm, but I know this game and I know the segment and I understand the history, and so I'm valuable. So in that way, I'm not pretending to be someone I'm not, and I'm open to learning and growing. So I'm not afraid to go into those meetings, but I'm also, willing to say, hey, can you say that again? Let's talk this over. Let's find a better way.
And as a former player, what are 1 or 2, 3 things that you've learned as an athlete and a player that you wish owners did for you that now you're thinking about doing for your players to bring value and make it a better experience?
Well, I have to say there's one that stands out above the rest that in men's sports nobody will talk about. Safety of the player has been the priority. And I think if you looked across the board in business, in sports or otherwise, safety has always been an issue for women. Whether that's safety of speaking out, whether that's safety being by yourself, whether that's walking to your car at night, whatever it is, safety is important. What is the culture of the environment, and do they support women? I'm going to say full stop. Safety is far and wide the most important.
And clearly that's at the core, has been at the core of the discussion around the NWSL.
Yes.
This is a league that, almost became the third failure,
right,
because of a gruesome, for lack of a better term, very widespread scandal across the league that led to the commissioner, stepping down. I have to think something starts to form in your head. Conversations are happening. Take us back to that moment.
Right. I think as those things are happening, obviously your head goes right to the players. And how could this happen? Because as guardians or stewards of the game, my generation, how didn't we change this? How did we let this happen? So I think there's a little bit of responsibility. Then I think the thoughts go to, how do we make it better? And what kind of influence can I as an individual have, or my collective group of 99ers have? And when Angel City was coming to town, myself, Allie Wagner, Danielle Slayton, Leslie Osborne, the other three founders. Yeah. Oh, I like that. Okay, I will say you said it first, but I might have to go forward with that. We said, why? We have a historical significance in women's soccer here, and yet we don't have a team. We have to do something. It all of a sudden started the gears churning a little bit harder and faster, and reaching out to people. And ultimately, when we met some good business folks, they said, money will be the least of your worries.
Really?
Yes. And I chuckled because I'm like a decade older than these other three, thinking money's always been the problem.
Right.
Always been the problem for us, because we get it and we don't know how to spend it. The league actually historically did not invite private equity to the table. And so we're game changers a little bit in that way, and that's a good thing, right? We're getting ourselves to look at ourselves and say why, and answer that why question, and then move forward to how can we then change the landscape altogether and make our league even better. And so, that conversation started happening right away.
So 6th Street, you got to think, well, if they're looking at all their data and they're looking in data room potential and forecasting, and they're investing, our viewers and listeners should be, is there something we should be investing in? But how does Brandi and the core four, as Jason, tagged you guys, how do you get on the table with 6th Street? Everybody wants to get on the table with them. Why you? How'd you make that pitch?
Great question. And I'm not sure I know all the parts, but I think being locals was very important. Yeah. We had other relationships with the likes of Sheryl Sandberg, who obviously we know her from a different space, but just, a woman in business. I think also, and honestly, at the grassroots level, kids playing soccer. Alan Waxman's kids are involved in youth soccer.
Alan Waxman, the co-founder and CEO of 6th Street.
Sorry. And I think they have investments in international professional leagues. And so they understand the game. And to your point about data, they see how that's driving a lot of significant monetary decisions and valuations. And so now is the right time.
And is it fair to say, Brandi, that as you guys start talking about this and you sit with Alan and the 6th Street team, it's got to feel different, the types of questions they're asking, than WUSA days and subsequent. I mean, did it feel different in terms of their approach? There's
no even comparing what has happened before with what is happening now. So it's almost a moot point. We don't need to discuss it, because it's so insignificant what we were doing back then, with the exception of the fact that we were still doing what we believed for women's soccer was the right thing, which was putting it out into the mass public in a professional landscape. And like many other innovations, the first time doesn't usually end in the final product. So it was necessary for WUSA and WPS to exist before. But no, sitting in a boardroom with 6th Street and going through sheet after sheet of necessary information, and to your point about how the data is driving everything, and how even to pick players and to line up players, and as a old school person, like I have to fight data every now and again, because I know with my eye I can tell you what I see and what I know to be valuable. But in the bigger market scheme, 6th Street's excellence will rise above and allow us to make some good decisions based upon things that we didn't have access to in the past.
And I mean, I think it's worth pointing out, I mean, you're sitting in, owners meetings all the time, Alex. This notion is radical. A private equity firm coming in, it's the first time in U.S. sports history that an institutional investor has been the majority owner. This has never happened in the NBA, NFL, MLB, elsewhere. I have to think, I mean, I'm turning to you for a second, but I mean, that must feel radical to you, from the outside in, and has the potential to change how sports investment overall happens, right?
It changes everything and is radical in one sense, but it's really a validation. To Brandi's point about some of the things I did as we fight data sometimes because, data is important, but it's not the gospel. It's a guide, not a gospel, right? And 3 things we did that were not really P&L builders were we built an owner's lounge because we wanted to cast a net to have people like yourself and Jason come in where Mark and I can visit and spend time with people. Locker room, the importance of locker room. We want players coming in early and leaving late. So casting a net that's really friendly environment for players. We know the difference between a great locker room and a poor locker room. And then thirdly, a family room. And then they said, why family room? Where's the P&L? I said, it's the single most important asset are our players and their partners. The reason I know is my girls were raised in the Yankee family room. So it is important. And, happy partner, happy player. And that's really 3 things that were really contrarian to numbers, but really have paid tremendous dividends to our players, and it shows in our record.
Yeah, and I think some things you can't put on paper, right? You can't, you just can't
quantify it.
Yeah, you can't. And I think peace of mind, safety, health and wholeness are aspects of the game that without those things, batting averages go down, errors go up, you don't win pennants, and fans don't buy your merchandise and they don't buy tickets. And so, good job.
Anxiety goes up. Revenue goes down, right?
Exactly. Alex mentioned earlier, sort of, confidence level. I'm going to turn that question a little bit to you now as an owner. It feels like something important is happening with the NWSL. You look at the numbers alone, $53 million expansion fee that you guys paid, record, $125 million you're investing, into this team. That's setting a new standard for other teams that are going to come into the league. Boston is coming in, I believe, that a year or 2 after you guys do. What is your confidence level as an owner that this time it's going to work, that this time is different?
Now we can look back over 10 years, like you're talking about, like what are the data points over the last 10 years, and we've seen it growing. We now have an ownership in Kansas City who has built the first ever women's sports-specific stadium. That's unbelievable. That will preview in Kansas City this season. We have more teams than we've ever had. We've had larger media buys than we've ever had in the past. Players from around the world, the best players around the world are coming to the NWSL. Coaches from around the world are coming to our league. So, what started out as obviously a young girl's dream is now manifesting itself in a proper business forum. We get to now, again, expand what women's soccer can do. And I'm very excited about that because I want to change FIFA at the same time as we're changing the landscape here in America about traditional sports. Like, that's radical. Baseball, of course, traditional American sport. American football, traditional American sport. Basketball, traditional American sport. Women's soccer, traditional American sport. And I'm so bullish on making that a part of the landscape. Like, you can't say American sport without saying women's soccer. I think that's critical to the future for me.
It is this fascinating moment for the global game, right? We came out of a World Cup, which was quite disappointing for those of us who are U.S. fans and fans and former players who have been at the pinnacle. How do you hold on to that? I mean, the world is, to your point about the American game, world's catching up.
It's interesting though. I'm going to say, everybody's saying the world is catching up. The world has been ahead of us in soccer since inception of the game.
Right.
So we really, I think, caught early momentum because we were very fortunate to live and be in the United States of America with Title IX. Blessings to Billie Jean King and the generation of women who fought so hard, and those lawmakers who enacted Title IX in 1972 because that changed the landscape. That allowed federally funded money to be spread across the board, and to get an education meant that you could also play sports. Now, not everybody was in compliance, so it didn't work perfectly in the beginning, but now it's changing. Yeah. And now we have so many women who are graduating as doctors and lawyers and whatever else that they want while also playing sports. The world isn't catching up to us. We have thrust ourselves into the soccer landscape in a way that nobody else could in the world.
Interesting.
And we did it really well because I think of what is so special about our country. What is so special about our country is we have people that are sitting right here together that look completely different. We come from different places. We may have our history or our heritage may have spoke different languages, but they came to America and they brought their best parts. And they worked hard, they became successful, and now the community grew. And the way we saw soccer at the beginning for women was we like what Spain's doing, we like what Japan's doing, Brazil, England, Norway, and we put it all together. And we were unafraid to say that. And we liked how that was kind of this melting pot. We are still new to soccer in our country compared to the world. We just found a way to do it better in the beginning. And now we have to be able to sustain that.
Right. So how do you do that?
I think you have to have the right people. I think people matter. And again, I think that's a diverse approach, not just gender, not just color. We have to have voices that come from all over, and we have to be comfortable in that. To me, that gives confidence to an organization. If you are diverse, you have a chance to grow in ways that institutions or organizations just can't. Mm-hmm. They can't understand.
You know, one thing that I'm curious about is, you know, where you look to for inspiration, and I might turn this on you in a second, Alex, too, because obviously playing a different sport from the sport you're now an owner in, where do you get inspiration as you think about building this new team?
Well, number one, I'm inspired by every environment I'm in, but I think again we're in Silicon Valley. The ideation and the innovation that happens here changes the world, and we want to be a leader globally in changing the way women's soccer, women's football is consumed, celebrated, shared, viewed, and we want to come up with radical ideas. I think the word radical today is probably what we're most interested in, being different. Us four, we've been different our whole lives. People have always asked us, like, why are you playing this game? Like, what's driving you to stay in this lane? And I think we just saw something different, and we've always been different. So we have a chance to work with some executives at the Warriors or the Giants or the 49ers, and we value their experiences. We should absolutely sit down and listen and be like, okay, how does that help us? And I think we can help each other.
I would imagine that those conversations are a lot easier in 2023, 2024 than they were 20 years ago.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of education that's gone around the world about the sport. I think, we're pretty fortunate that we participated in the Olympic Games. Obviously, everybody values the Olympics in a different way than they do professional leagues. The 99ers were a collective of trailblazers, to be honest with you. We had a leader in Mia Hamm who was thrust into the spotlight and carried herself so humbly and so honestly and so team first that it just endeared people to what it is that we were doing. And it wasn't even big at that time. So, what's happening now, just, think about how we've been spinning those wheels for so long. We finally got the traction to make a bigger difference is really phenomenal. Again, it all comes down to the people and the culture that we want to create for every single person who sets foot into our stadium. or onto the training ground, or into the locker room, into the boardroom, is that they're valued, they're respected, that they have something to contribute to the outcome, and that they also will be leaders at some point.
As an owner, player turn owner, what has been the biggest surprise, if any? And is there any owners out there that you're looking at, studying, and basically trying to learn from?
I'm trying to learn from everybody. I'm as naive as a new day. Like I this is not my specialty. I think there's, again, we're very fortunate that we have started with 6th Street and that we have this opportunity with this institutional capital to march forward in a big way. And that, I think, right there sets the foundation for the type of group we can be and team we can be. I talk to a lot of fans. I mean, people stop me everywhere. Mm-hmm. Dog park, the golf club, and they're like, we are so excited about your team. And then I ask them why, tell me why. And they're like, we haven't seen it before and we want to be a part of it and we can't afford something else. We grew up playing the game. It reminds me of my childhood. I mean, so many reasons people want to be involved.
And Brandi, there's a lot of athletes out there that are listening to you, that you're their role model. What surprises have you seen that surprised you that would surprise them as players, not as owners?
Honestly, it's everything for me right now. We took our team down to Santa Barbara and we stayed in the most beautiful place. Like, the thought of that happening for women's soccer was never. I would never think about that. But they deserve it. And so we should do that. The opportunity, Julie Foudy used to say this all the time. We'd come into the hotel and we'd have like one of those big conference rooms for the buffet breakfast or the buffet lunch. And it was the same old stuff and not great. And she just say, can I just have cheddar cheese? Please, just give me cheddar cheese, instead of the
white cheese food,
the American,
right.
That would have made things so much better.
Right.
So it's little things, honestly.
Yeah, I'll tell you from personal experience, Jason and Brandi, I will tell you that I played for almost 23 years in the major leagues with 3 teams, Seattle, Texas, and the Yankees. And I took a lot of things for granted. I mean, life in the major leagues was outstanding. I mean, you show up, the locker room, you have all type of food, all type of cheese, white, red, yellow.
Plenty of cheddar.
You show up and you have clean uniforms. You go on the charter. You fly to a team. You stay at a beautiful hotel. You have per diem. You have all these things. And I never thought once, how does this all happen? How does a train run? Right. And now being on the other side as an owner, you realize all the work and all the people and all the commitment that takes to keep that train moving. It's been pretty an educational process for me.
Yeah, I think also to that point, and I'm glad that you said that because, from our perspective, we didn't experience something like that to that degree. But I think the thing, again, that we noticed as a team in 99 specifically, and why this group is so special about, we all have to contribute to the outcome, right? And it doesn't matter if you're serving the food or you're picking up the balls or you're cleaning up after yourself. The amount of gratitude that you have for this opportunity and the people around you is paramount to anything. It doesn't matter what your job is. If you're, the center back or the goalkeeper, you can still pick up the balls. Right. You can still move the goal. You can still say thank you very much for the meal that's just been served. And I think that awareness of the humanity that happens around professional sports, and my dedication and my deliberate shout out to my team and other teams in the NWSL is we have to have a connection to the people who come to our stadiums, and they have to feel like this belongs to them. That is what will happen here, and I hope that happens everywhere because, Alex, I know that people would love to be next to you. They'd love to get close to you, to get your autograph or to look you in the eye and you just smile. And then, that was me as a kid. I was waiting right here in San Jose, California for George Best to come out from the San Jose Earthquakes locker room and for me to be able to get a picture or to have an autograph. And most times it didn't happen. And I went away like, okay, maybe next time, like I was enthusiastic about it, but it never happened. When our games were done, our practices were done, and I had an opportunity to engage with fans, that's always a priority. Because at the end of the day, without them, an empty stadium means nothing.
You have a lot of young athletes, fans from all over the world. A lot of people want to be like you. They want to be a great Hall of Fame type player like you. They want to have abs like you.
Well, hey, that was a long time ago, my friend.
They want
I got
to
a
be
big jacket on.
An owner like you and follow your lead. How can someone who's out there, who's young, middle-aged, older, how can they be more like you?
First, I think the number one important thing to remind these people is to be your best self, right? Trying to be somebody else will never work. You have to be yourself. You have to invest time, invest your time and know your craft, and to be humble while doing it, because it will, as it did for me, my whole career was not this straight line ascension to Olympic gold medals and World Cup championships. I was injured. I had 2 ACL reconstructions. I was out of the sport for 2.5 years injured. I was on the team. I was cut from the team. I was brought back, changed position. So I would say it's important to be yourself, to invest time in yourself, to understand that you will make mistakes and you will fall down, but you're going to be fine. You're going to get up and you're going to go after it. Be kind. Be kind and know that no one's perfect. And my mom, rest her soul, she gave me a saying when I was a kid, when things weren't going well, when I was injured and out of collegiate soccer for, like I said, those 2.5 years. She said, Brandi, find your yes. People are going to tell you no, and that is okay. Don't be afraid to ask the question. So that's what I would say to people. Find your yes. It won't always come easy. It won't always come in the way that maybe you've dreamt it, but it's out there, and you can do it.
This has just been such a pleasure. Thank you for having us in your town.
Yes, thank you.
Best of luck with the season, with the team.
Well, I would love to invite you to come to one of our games if you wouldn't mind.
Say
I'd
less.
love to.
We'll
Thank you. And likewise to Minnesota.
Thank you.
Timberwolves and the Lynx.